What's up, fellow drivers? Today I'm going to do a full review of my Nissan GTR. This is a 2013 Black Edition, and by the end of this video I hope to answer 3 questions. Is it daily drivable? Should you buy one? And is it a real supercar? Let's go. Alright, so the first performance aspect I want to talk about is handling. The GTR is known, of course, for big power, and we'll talk more about that later on. But handling is something that's really kind of underrated on the GTR. And if you think about it, it's set incredible lap times around the Nürburgring. It's been competitive in professional motorsports, and it's just generally a beast of the car on any track. And I think the fact that it is so fast in a straight line kind of overshadows the fact that it's actually extremely good in the turns too. The GTR was extremely revolutionary when it came out for its first model year of 2009, and it was a kick in the teeth to every other supercar manufacturer and honestly just clowned all of them. So instead of just doing highway pulls, I'm up here in the mountains so we can really kind of test what the car feels like driving. Now the GTR, of course, is front engine all-wheel drive. The steering has a pretty good weight to it as well. It's not too light, it's not too heavy, and it feels pretty sharp. Now, it is, all-wheel drive, and so it's not quite as communicative as some like rear-wheel drive cars, but I still really feel like I can tell where the tires are and what they're doing. I get some vibrations that come through the steering column into the steering wheel. I'm aware of traction. And overall, I would rate the handling on the GTR to be quite high. Now, of course, everything that I just said about handling is about how it feels. As far as the car's actual limits for going around turns, that is amazing. You will go around turns driving this car and wonder how it was even possible. Like, it's really kind of mind-blowing. And the only indication that anything really was happening that, wasn't something that you were doing is the little flashing traction light on the dash that goes off sometimes when you're being really aggressive. So I'm going uphill now, and this car is a rocket. I mean, wow. I've had it for a while now, and it still puts a huge smile on my face. Rolling through the gears here with this super snappy dual clutch transmission, it feels so good. All right, whew, that was a big number. Better make sure I don't get into too much trouble here. But this car tends to kind of shrink around you. The faster you fly down the road, the more it just feels like it gets in the zone as you do, and you almost don't even notice anything else around you except for just you and the road. The shifts are very quick when you have it in race mode. Now the power really comes on above 4,000 or so, but the turbo can be pretty laggy in lower RPMs. But if you're really trying to go hard, that won't be a problem. Boost will be on demand if you're up there in higher RPMs. But honestly, it has so much power that even if you're down in the lower RPMs, around 3,000 or so, you can pull out of turns so easily. Like, you just get this surge of power behind you, and unless you have a really long stretch of road, you really can't even begin to use it. All that being said, I'm still having a ton of fun. Like, just because I'm not using all of the car's capabilities doesn't mean that I'm not using all of my capabilities. Now, this brings up an aspect that people talk about the GTR often being like a video game car. Don't believe it, okay? Now, as much as I said that it has incredible cornering capability and the only indication that anything might have gone wrong is the blinking light, you can definitely still get into trouble with this car. It is so capable that an inexperienced driver could probably push this way beyond the point of their abilities because it is initially easy to drive. But I've had the car on the track and depending on what setting you put the car on, it gives you quite a bit of play. So that brings up the 3 modes on the dash. You have one for the transmission, you have one for the suspension, and then one for the traction control. You can adjust them all independently. So they all have 3 different modes. For the suspension, you have race, normal, and comfort. And for the transmission, you have race, normal, and save. And save is basically used to kind of cut power and use on really slippery surfaces like ice or heavy rain. And if you're on really long cruises going down the freeway, you can save fuel economy that way as well. And then of course you have traction control, and it has normal, race, and off. And it's really cool that you can adjust them all independently. And they're also completely independent of having the transmission in automatic or manual as well. And this is something that even to this day, some supercars and high-end cars don't allow you to do. They kind of all come as packages, which is kind of annoying, but the GTR allows you to adjust all of them to whatever you want. So for my personal taste up here in the mountains, I actually like having the suspension on comfort because the road does get kind of bumpy. And I have the transmission in race and the traction control on normal. Now, when you have it in its most aggressive setting of race, it does definitely give you a lot of play. And of course, if you turn the traction control completely off, be careful. So once and for all, I would like to dispel the rumor that the GTR is not exciting or that it's too video gamey. You get a lot of information coming through the wheel. The car is exciting, it's fast, and frankly, it does require skill when you're actually driving on the track. And anybody who tells you otherwise really has not done any serious track driving. And also, anybody who thinks it's not exciting has probably not driven it either, because the car is insane. Now, as you're going around these really tight hairpins, this is a pretty tight road, and the car does feel a little bit big. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not able to handle it, but I would like a little more space to really be able to stretch its legs. Also, you can feel the weight when you're going around the turns, but frankly, it kind of feels like it doesn't matter. Like the car can just take it anyway. Oh, man, even with the stock exhaust, it is a little muted, but the engine still sounds really good. Another really cool thing about the GTR is this fully customizable display here in the center unit. So I can watch things like my engine temp, my transmission temp, my oil pressure, my boost, torque split, so how much power is going to the front versus the rear, all of that in real time. And it's totally customizable. So there are many different screens that are presets, and then as well, I'm just gonna flip it over to automatic for a second, as well as screens that are fully customizable. So I can either have a large gauge, or I can have with 2 small ones, or I can have 6 small ones. I can see my steering angle. It's really kind of amazing, all the information that you can see in it. And this is something that was really revolutionary. Nowadays, pretty much all supercars have things where you can see most of this information. But when the GTR came out, nobody was doing this. This was super revolutionary. So not only in terms of all-out performance, but also just in other cool technology and features, the GTR was way ahead of its time. And to be honest, the GTR has been out for quite a while now. And people are starting to say that they need to come out with a new model. But quite frankly, the only reason the GTR is still as relevant as it is, and it's still pretty competitive with most other supercars out there and high-end sports cars, is because it was so far ahead when it first came out. It wasn't until the last few years that the rest of the world, like Ferrari and Lamborghini, really started to kind of catch up and edge out the GTR in some aspects. Man, I'm just able to rocket out of these corners with this all-wheel drive. I mean, you can put on the power really early and it just pulls out straight ahead. It can send power to wherever it thinks it needs. So it can actually do, I believe, up to 98% of torque to the rear wheels, essentially making it a rear-wheel drive car, which it will often do if you're just cruising down the freeway, or if you're doing a hard launch and it needs to send most of the power to the rear wheels because the weight has shifted, it'll do that. But if you're up here in the twisties in the mountains, or you're on the track going through turns, in split seconds, it'll be sending power up to the front or the back, wherever it feels it needs to correct it or get the most power going down to the ground. Another really important thing for any car that's trying to go fast is stopping power. And the brakes on the GTR definitely have it. They have Brembos in all four corners, and they hold up to a lot of abuse. Up here, when you're in the mountains, you're not going to experience any fade at all. And when you're out on the track, they can still stand up to quite a bit of abuse. That being said, you know, if you're really trying to be competitive, a brake upgrade as far as pads and rotors is recommended, because under really aggressive braking repeatedly on the track, they are known to actually get hairline fractures in the rotors. So that's a small weakness that you might want to keep in mind if you are going to be doing a lot of track driving. But the pedal feels good. It doesn't get soft at all. And when I was on the track, I was amazed that I was able to outbrake even smaller, lighter cars like a Cayman GT4. All right, so as much fun as I'm having up here, I think it's time to head down into the city, and we'll see what it's like to just cruise around as a daily driver. All right, so I'm cruising through downtown now, and I gotta say, people's reaction to this car is great. Like, you'll get people giving you thumbs up out the window, people asking questions, like a guy was just asking me about it at the gas station. And this one guy came up to me and he was like, hey, what have you done to it? And I was like, nothing, it's totally stock. And he was like, well, you know, they really wake up with tunes. I was thinking like, oh, really? I didn't know the GTR was tunable. But, you know, besides me being snarky, he really is right. The GTR is extremely tunable. It's very safe to get up to 700 horsepower with relatively minor mods on the GTR. And, you know, with full builds, you can get up to 1,000, 1,500, 2,500 horsepower. Honestly, the GTR can be absolutely insane. The truth is, though, it's kind of already pretty insane. But we're here to talk about how daily drivable it is. So let's talk about comfort. I have it in comfort suspension mode right now, and it absorbs the bumps pretty well. Actually, I should take that back. LA can literally be like off-roading sometimes, and even on comfort, it can't deal. But for the most part, you know, it's pretty comfortable. I have it in automatic mode. I don't have to fuss with shifting. If it was cold out, I have seat heaters with 2 levels of heating on them. And I've got AC that is ice cold. And you might think like any car should have good AC, right, if it's new. But the GTR's is like noteworthy cold. It is like freaking frigid. There are many times when I have to turn up the temperature or just turn it off because I'm actually getting too cold, even if it's like 100 degrees out and the AC has been going for a while. The trunk has plenty of space. I will say that if you're loading large items, it can be a little bit difficult because the bumper actually comes up high. There's no cutout in the trunk lid, but the trunk itself is quite large, so you can definitely use it to carry multiple bags, and it can definitely more than serve all of your daily use needs for like groceries and that type of thing. You have the back seat, so if you do have a family with small kids, they can definitely ride back there. Even adults, legroom isn't too bad, but the headroom definitely is restrictive. So if you're over, you know, like 5'2", 5'3", something like that, you're probably really not gonna have enough room for your head. But if you've got kids, it's definitely doable. And I actually have a coworker, one of the doctors at my work, he has his child seat, like a baby car seat, in the back of his GTR all the time. And the first time I saw that out in the parking lot, I was like, there you go, it's a family car. So at the beginning of the video, I said that this was a Black Edition. So quick note on what actually makes it a Black Edition. It has a dry carbon rear wing, as well as this red trim on the seats that you see here, and it has different wheels. Now these wheels were also offered on the Track Edition, which was technically a higher tier, but more or less parallel, and it actually doesn't have a back seat. So that's what makes it the Black Edition. It's mostly cosmetic, but does have some, theoretically slightly better performance characteristics because lighter carbon fiber, and the wheels actually are lighter than the standard ones that come on the Premium Edition. So let's talk about downsides a little bit. Honestly, there aren't a lot of them. And, I'm just struggling to think of ones because the GTR just is so well-rounded. But I will say that one of the disadvantages that you may see if you're looking for a used one, for instance, is on the paddles. They tend to get kind of worn off and just sort of crappy looking. So for whatever reason, the finish that they put on those paddles just wasn't good, and it doesn't really last over a long period of time. The other sort of odd thing that isn't really good, sort of a known problem with the GTR, is on the carbon fiber. Oftentimes the clear coat on that will start to kind of chip off, and I'm really sad about it. I don't really know what to do about that other than just getting it, totally stripped off and just put on a new clear coat eventually if you need to. And another little random thing that you might notice is the light on the switches here tend to go out sometimes. Personally, I haven't had a problem with that yet, but I have heard that some people's have gone out, and it's sort of a pain in the ass to fix it from what I understand. All right, so earlier I talked about acceleration, but we didn't really get to demonstrate it. Now the GTR will go up to 198 miles per hour. Unfortunately, I can't show you top speed, but I can show you at 0 to 60 time of 2.8 seconds. That comes from its 545 horsepower. Let's try it. Dude, yes! Every time I do that, it is so freaking amazing. Woo! All right, that is quite possibly the most fun thing to do with the GTR, as much as everything else is awesome. I've driven some really good cars, but the GTR just hits different. Alright, so that's the GTR. At the beginning of the video, I asked 3 questions. Is it daily drivable? Yeah, I would definitely say it is. Unless you have a lot of people with you for some reason, or you have a lot of small children, there's no reason as a single person that you couldn't totally use this as your daily driver. Even if you do have small kids, they can totally fit in the back seat, and the trunk is big enough that it'll fit all of your daily use needs. What about the second question? Should you buy one? If you have the budget for a car that's this expensive, definitely. I mean, honestly, I'm trying to think what you could possibly get for the same amount of money that would give this much performance and just sort of general, presence, I guess you could say. Which kind of brings me to the last question, is it a real supercar? And to that, I would also say yes. There's only about 12,000 GTRs total that have been made. And that's pretty exclusive, even if you're used to seeing them a lot at car shows. When people see it, they point at it, they give you thumbs up, people are excited about it, and it's crazy fast. Even though it's as old as it is, it's been out for nearly a decade now, it's still really killing most other supercars out there. And sure, there are ones that are faster at this point, but as you can see, 0 to 60, it's still a beast. It still does it in 2.8 seconds compared to most of its rivals. That's just as fast or quicker. It was revolutionary. I don't know, what else do I need to say? Yes, it is a supercar. Thanks for watching.